Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Josh and Artemis show. Sorry, my voice. I'm really sick right now. But anyway, we have a special guest tonight. We have Jorge coming on, who's a kinesiology student, and he's going to talk about basically what he's going through in his university and like social life with his whole gender ideology bullshit. Basically.
Yeah.
Like no other way to say it.
Yeah. So he got in contact with us a few days ago, told us his story and what's happened to him. And he also sent us a very good letter, which he wrote to the faculty board of the university, I think it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very good, a very mature letter. And do you know what? When we read it, we were like, yes, there's actually some young people with their heads screwed on.
I know
these days.
I know it is a breath of fresh air.
It was a breath of fresh air. Sorry, and Jorge, he's a Gen Z guy, of course.
I know.
So it's
I don't really talk to Gen Zs.
We don't speak to Gen Zs.
So
We do not speak to Gen Z people. So it's going to be interesting to talk to him. We had a brief chat backstage. Seems like a very nice young man.
Yeah.
And a very smart young man too. So we're looking forward to speaking to him. Apologies for yesterday, guys. Artemis hasn't been well, so we had to postpone. We had to postpone our show with April, but that will be tomorrow. So April's going to come on tomorrow and talk about the latest stuff with and the man Anders. So we're looking forward to that.
Lots of transanity there. So yeah, we definitely will. Hopefully, I'm even better tomorrow.
Absolutely. So we'll bring Jorge in, but before we do, guys, as usual, if you are brand new to our channel, remember to like, share, subscribe to the show. It does really help us a lot. We go live every night, 8 p.m. Eastern, depending on if we're actually well enough to do the show. So the last day or two, Artemis has been unwell, and we've also had the girls being unwell as well. So we've had to postpone a couple. But thankfully, I've been okay for now. So we'll see how that goes.
And the youngest.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys just don't get it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes. And also, if you do want to support the show, you could become a YouTube or Patreon member. Links are in the description and, of course, the bio of our homepage. We want to thank our YouTube and Patreon members for donating to the show. It does mean a lot to us. It does really help support the show. And make sure to follow us on X. We hit 5K the other day, which was really cool. So appreciate all the support, guys. But yeah, let's bring Jorge
Let's bring him in,
All right.
Here he is.
Hello.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for willing to come on the show. We know this is a difficult topic of conversation for people. So, it's credit to yourself for willing to come on camera to talk about it. So thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly find it kind of exciting to talk about because in my real life, there's not many people that I can talk about this with because everyone is so either bought into it or has no idea what's going on and doesn't pay any attention.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, and you live in BC, of course, which we had a brief chat backstage about that, and you said it's pretty bad there with this gender stuff.
Yeah. So I live in a city in BC, and I don't know about more rural areas, but definitely like urban centers like Vancouver, for example, are very, I don't know, for lack of a better term, woke in all this stuff, particularly gender. And there's a lot going on in BC with our curriculum called SOGI. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like the sexual orientation, gender identity curriculum that's pushed in schools, which is,
I have heard of it.
Which I escaped. So I graduated high school in 2017, which is not really that long ago when you think about it. But when I went to high school, I never heard anything LGBTQI+. There was no trans. We never shared our pronouns. There was no flags in our school. And somehow this happened since I graduated in 2017. It's just infiltrated. So I managed to escape it.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank God for that.
Yeah, and that's good how we did escape it. And we always talk about this as well because we're in our 30s, so we're a bit older than you, about 10 years older.
Early 30s.
Yeah, early 30s. And we can remember when we were at school. I was from the UK, obviously. Artemis was from here
in Ontario.
And there was no mention of any of this stuff at school for me. We didn't learn about gender or race theory or any of these things, and it is crazy how things have changed in such a short space of time. You mentioned you didn't hear about this and you graduated in 2017. So it's only really the last 6 years or so where this has really kind of ramped up. In your university, Ben, I mean, is this a common mentality of people to kind of buy into this stuff, do you think?
I would describe it kind of as the default view. I think it is like a small minority of people that are very much bought in, but then I think the majority of people they don't really understand, and they kind of go along with it because it's sort of seen as the acceptable position, and like no one's going to give you any trouble if you go along with it, if you have the pronouns in your bio, if you don't challenge it in any way, and you kind of just shut up and listen whenever you're indoctrinated, really. There's a few people that deep down are against it, I think, but they're like afraid to speak. That's been my experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we completely agree with that. And, we do see a lot of people, we kind of talk to people in the background and things, and, they always say, oh, this is completely wrong. But they feel like they don't have a voice, or they're kind of scared to voice their concerns about it. But for me, I mean, I think we all have to. It comes to a point where, you've got to think about the future, and you've got to think about what happens if we don't stop this in its tracks now. Because to me, the worry is this is a very slippery slope for me, because right now we've got the gender conversation, but you're already kind of seeing murmurings and small changes to language in regards to pedophiles and things like this, which for me is a bigger concern, where they're trying to label sex offenders, pedophiles, as minor attracted persons now. So this is the slope for me, and if we don't stop this in its tracks, then things could get worse from here, in my opinion.
I think the language part is like particularly interesting, because I do feel like all these ideas around language are basically propped up by like speech, and I mean, language is really the way that we formulate laws and how we conceive of things. And so really, I feel like the activists have successfully changed language in order to, change laws and try to change how we conceive of reality.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
no, for sure. And that was one of the points you brought up in the letter you wrote to, I think it was the school board you wrote it to.
Yeah, basically the faculty leadership.
The faculty, yeah. And you mentioned in there about the language change and the desanitization of language for me, which is one of the big points as to how this has got so out of control. And I think you mentioned in Canada, they've actually removed the definitions of what a man and a woman is, so you can sell.
So I kind of wanted to like learn a bit more about like where this came from. So when I was looking up the Department of Justice to figure out like what the Department of Justice says a man and woman is, according to the Canadian Department of Justice, a man is anyone who identifies as a man, and a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman, which is a totally like circular thing. You can't actually, so a man or woman is anyone basically, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having a word to describe what a man or woman is. Like the purpose of a word is so that we know what something is and what something is not. It's like we can call a lamp, but if a lamp now means like a house, it's no longer a useful word, right? So words are supposed to mean something and exclude everything else from that meaning.
For sure. We see that with like pronouns too, like people like these like extremists like on like TikTok and stuff saying like, you can choose whatever pronoun you want. You could be called void. And it's like, but that's not what void means.
What's void? I've never heard of that.
You never saw that. No. It was posted on X, because we don't have TikTok, but it was basically just like that. If you don't identify as like he, she, they, zer, whatever of those pronouns, you can also just choose a random word. Like you could choose fairy, you could choose void. And it's like, but these are words that already mean something. So you're also just like confusing like the English language. Like it like people cannot just forget what they've learned through their lives either. It's the same thing with calling somebody they, and I'm like, but you're singular. Like it is really hard to like connect those, because it's like, that's not the English language, and it's like, can we not just stick to the English language?
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it's something I felt about this whole thing before I really got into it and started like learning about it every day and kind of immersed myself in the whole gender world. Like my initial impression, like maybe a few years ago, was just like how like I didn't understand how this could be like an effective strategy to live your life because for example, if you choose to go by, I don't know, void self or some one of these neo pronouns, you need to train everyone around you in your
Yeah,
life to use that pronoun, or you, I don't know, become outraged or like throw a tantrum or whatever,
and they
or
do.
yeah, or just become like unhappy because of that. So you're basically taking all of like your well-being and happiness and placing it into the hands of everyone else around you, which is
Yeah.
really not an effective way to live your life. And somehow in society I just feel like we're afraid to say no, like no, you shouldn't try and do this, it's not going to help you in the long run. So that's kind of how I felt about this sort of like all these gender ideology stuff is like it's not good for the individual, because I think
Mhm.
they could live
No.
happier, more productive lives if they like resolve their other issues and like come to terms with just the reality of being a male or female. Um, and then I guess as I got more and more into like, I don't know, learning about gender ideology and kind of exposing myself to the arguments, I sort of started to realize like the implications of all the gender ideas and kind of the impact on women's rights and children's rights. And I guess I went for like more and more mild, and like the more and more I learned about it, the more I just like went full blown turf mode. So I guess
Yeah.
the other side would say I've become like some sort of radicalized extremist,
Mm.
but here I am.
Well,
Yeah.
at least you're living in reality.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, and this is the thing. It takes guys like yourself to stand up, and this is what we were saying just before there. That it is important to stand up, and it is good to see. I mean, because you are a young man, and it is good to see because the common kind of theme we see with the Gen Z generation really is
Mhm.
they've been corrupted by this whole gender conversation. And like you
Yeah.
said before, it's kind of just socially accepted that this is what you have to be.
mhm.
You have to be on board with this. But in reality, you actually don't, because like you just said there,
Mhm.
which is spot on, that what these people are doing is effectively relying on other people for their own happiness and well-being, which isn't how it should be. I mean, you should learn about yourself. You should be comfortable with yourself. You shouldn't need people to tell you how to feel or how to be to live your life. And I've,
Well, yeah.
it is sad in some ways as well. It is crazy, of course, and it is a fucked up thing at times where you've got some crazy stories we've all seen, but at the same time, you've got so many young people who have just been completely manipulated by this
For
um,
sure. And
by by this ideology.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it is sad as well. It's crazy, but it is sad at the same time.
Especially for like the really like young
Yeah.
like children just like starting puberty or going to start puberty, and like instead of like getting like more support, they're just being told, yeah, you actually are born in the wrong body, let's
Mm.
get
Yeah.
you some help. And it's like, why would you tell a child that? Like, no one's born in the wrong body, okay?
Mhm.
Like, whether you believe in like evolution or God, like there's no mistake there. Like it, but what's going on in your mind shouldn't be treated physically. Like it should be
Yeah.
treated with like a proper psychologist who's not just going to also affirm that you're born in the wrong body. Like they're going to get you proper help and actually understand why you feel that way. Like there's a lot of reasons why, including like abuse and sexual abuse as a child, or if you're on the spectrum. Like there's a lot of different reasons why a child would maybe feel that way,
Mm.
or also because puberty is uncomfortable and no one enjoyed going through puberty. I
Mhm.
don't know if you did, but like I know I didn't. I don't think you did. Like it's an
I
uncomfortable
I can't
thing.
I can't remember any like kind of
I remember being
bad times.
uncomfortable. I didn't want to be a boy, but
I
like,
had a few spots and stuff, but I mean, so it was fine. I
well,
didn't have any issues with puberty really.
oh, okay, well, lucky you. I was like, I went through puberty a bit earlier than
Yeah.
some of my friends, so I was very aware of my body changes and looking around, and it's like, oh my god,
Yeah.
why aren't other girls growing boobs? So like,
Mhm.
to me it was very awkward. I mean, you grow out of it, and I didn't
Mm.
think I was a boy, but like, it's just an uncomfortable growing like
Well,
stage, and you're learning about yourself.
And this is the crazy thing about all of that. The actual cure for a lot of this stuff with the gender dysphoria is to go through puberty, and the fact that these people in power, these the government, medical institutions, schools, parents, they're all saying, let's just stop the cure effectively. Let's just pause the cure and put you onto these puberty blockers, and in some cases go through surgery to cut breasts off or cut your penis off or whatever. And it's just absolutely insane. I mean, how do you think this is going to evolve in the future? Do you think this is going to get back to normal, or do you think this is just the way things are now?
I mean, I'm somewhat optimistic, maybe in the longer term. I just think it is like, I think it's unsustainable to continue like this lie, especially once people that have been harmed medically by it start coming out more and more. And I'm sure there's going to be lawsuits, and there's going to be scandals, especially just from children that have either had their puberty blocked, or girls that have had the mastectomies, or young people that have had the genital mutilation type surgeries.
Yeah.
I think people will slowly wake up over time, but it's going to take a long time, and there's going to always forever be those that are bought into it. I don't think it's ever going to go away entirely, because like people are not going to want to admit that they were wrong, especially when they were promoting like such, I don't know, really evil, sinister things like destroying genitals and blocking children's development.
For sure. I think you're right there. And also, I mean, like we've talked about with the education system, that's been completely corrupted now. So in a sense, I mean, we were talking about this on the way to get my haircut today. We're constantly talking about this, and we were saying, they've completely corrupted the universities, the schools. So it could actually get worse, because they've completely corrupted all these kids. They've completely corrupted the university. So, it's bad now, but once all these kids and stuff go through university, they graduate, go into the workplace, it's already kind of there again. It's even more widespread, if that makes sense. So I do hope it gets better, but it could get even worse from here. Which is crazy to me.
It's true. But if those kids are growing up, then they might also start to have regrets.
True.
So they might also, once they are adults, they might realize the things that they cannot participate in, like having children. And things like, if they want, and things like that. So it might be a mix of both, because for sure, like workplaces and stuff are promoting this everywhere you see now too. And in the governments, at the schools, the mainstream media, but who knows, once all these children who've been kind of indoctrinated into the cult grow up, they might also have major regrets. And SS in the chat brought up a good point that they'll start suing.
Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you.
This will ruin the medical industry once people start suing. Yeah, correct. And I think that was the point. What was brought up. Did you read that New York Times article, Jorge? What came out? I think it was last week or the week before, where they were talking about the detransitioners. And for the New York Times to say that was a big deal for me, because that's a very left-leaning newspaper.
Yeah, right.
So for the New York Times to come out and do a big spread on detransitioners and the dangers of gender-affirming care, which is basically mutilating kids, was a big deal for me. And I think you will see a lot more lawsuits coming. And I think that, like SS was saying there, I think that will change things for sure. Or at least I hope so. Ashley with another comment. How many of these children are only saying they're trans just to get puberty blockers because puberty sucks and they don't understand the long-term consequences? Yeah, I think that's part of it. What's your thoughts on that, Jorge?
Yeah, I think I basically think the whole gender obsession for children is something they're taught into, or like conditioned into, really, by, I don't know, either the school, social media, or friends groups. So I'm pretty much bought into the social contagion argument. I think it pretty much accurately explains the whole thing. These are probably kids that might be, I don't know, kind of, for lack of a better word, kind of like quirky, a little bit socially awkward, maybe kind of into, I don't know, niche things, and maybe not very popular. And they spend a lot of time online. They find these sort of trans communities. They get love bombed. So it's like a way to get acceptance and to get like these extra points, really, because being trans now is so like celebrated and cool. It's like it's very seductive to a kid to want to take on an identity where you get to be kind of this like special person, and you get like all this praise and this extra treatment. And it's framed to you as a good idea that could solve your problems that you may have. Like you may actually have discomfort with your body, but that doesn't mean you're literally born in the wrong body. You're just uncomfortable about your body, which is something that should be worked through. So I think it is a disaster for these young people, and it's something like I said earlier, like I completely avoided going to school, and I didn't go to school that long ago. There was not a single trans kid in my school of like, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people. And now I'm sure it's like half the school, probably, I'm exaggerating, is like a they, them, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, we have seen the numbers go up. I mean, I think I read a couple months ago, this is in America, 30% of kids now. So like Gen Z kids, I think it said, 30% now I identify as LGBTQ plus 2A or whatever, which is just absolutely insane. And I think they said that by 2030 they expect that to go up to 40%, which is nearly half. I mean, it's just nuts how much this is, taken over society and young people's lives. And of course, I mean, some of that could be down to the fact that, if people are gay, for example, they find it more they find it easier to come out in this current like a society, if that makes sense. But I think that's a very small number. I mean, I think the vast majority of that rise in people is because of this trans trender, which is what we call it. It's like just trendy to be trans now, because that people know that if they go to their parents or their teacher and say that they're trans, they get special treatment, they get a pat on the back, they get told that they're some sort of special being, when in reality they just need a good arm around them and some mental health support, in my opinion. They don't need any surgeries or anything like this. Let's talk about your story then.
Sure.
Jorge. So what actually happened? So you're like a very outspoken person when it comes to this in your university. So talk us through what happened exactly.
All right. So, I guess I go to school for kinesiology, which, for those that don't know what kinesiology is, it basically means the study of human movement. The degree is pretty broad. It's basically, I describe it as exercise science. We study things like training and rehab, sports psychology, disease processes, and we also talk about social issues in certain classes, where you can kind of see where this is going. So it's a very broad degree. I'm finishing my third year. I've enjoyed it so far. Like, I'm pretty passionate about the whole field. So I get straight A's. I'm like a good student. I'm an honor student. And the school is, of course, very woke, you would say. Like, there's pride flags everywhere and all this nonsense. And when I started to realize that I needed to kind of become informed on this topic of gender was last semester. I had a class taken, and the class was basically about social issues as it relates to sports. And I could tell the professor of this course was going to be very woke, and I could see, before I started taking the course, in the syllabus, I could see one of the topics that was like covered in this course was the gender thing in sports. So I basically already knew red flags. I know what's going to happen. And at this point, like, I was not fully, I don't know, peaked, I guess you call it. Like, I wasn't full turf mode. I didn't really know much yet. So I just decided, like, in this class, I know, like, we're going to get indoctrinated about the gender thing. And I feel like I need to learn a bit about it, so I'm able to, I don't know, at least provide some pushback. And this started with me, like, before the class started. I just started, going on the internet and seeing what's out there and just trying to educate myself. And I ended up reading, like, lots of the typical gender critical books, like Trans by Helen Joyce and Material Girls by Kathleen Stock, and all these sort of gender critical books. I started following, I don't know, gender critical podcasts and YouTube channels, and just like figuring out what's going on and trying to like explore this issue so I could speak better on it. And so the class started, and like I expected, the first day we're asked to share our pronouns and all this stuff. And I like actually when we were asked to share our pronouns, no one did. Like no one did. It was just sort of like it was like one of those first classes, like as a little icebreaker, and it's like just say your name, say your pronouns, and
So
then
this is
first.
one of the first things they
Mhm.
ask you then when you
Oh
go
yeah,
into class.
Like an
Wow.
yeah. So
icebreaker.
it's kind of like first week of classes, it's like syllabus day, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what the course is about. We're gonna do a little icebreaker, like say what you did over the summer or something like that, and say your name and pronouns. And yeah, no one shared their pronouns, even though students who are probably kind of woke, like just everyone just says their name and moves on to the next person. So it's kind of interesting. Even the very woke people aren't necessarily eager to share their pronouns because it's all a bit silly. Everyone knows. Yeah, so the class goes on, and eventually the topic does come up. I mean, the class, it covers other social issues in sport and stuff, and from a fairly kind of wokey perspective. But I don't particularly take issue with any of the other topics presented in the class. It's just mainly this issue came up, and it came up the first time. It was just like, oh, like what do we think of it? Let's have a little class discussion, and it was just like the whole class was silent, like no one wanted to say anything. And then like someone said like, oh, it's complicated. I'm not really sure what we should do about it. And I think it was one of the students that was like on one of our varsity sports teams actually. And they said, oh, we had a trans woman on our team and they did great. And it was all fine. And I'm up like, hold on. Like seriously, like, so I was pretty surprised at that point. I'm like, wow, okay, that's so you're clearly bought into this. And so at this point, I had never come out. I'm like at school, I'm a pretty quiet guy. Like no one really necessarily knows who I am. Like I'm sure they kind of know my name, but I hadn't really. I'm usually pretty quiet in my classes, and this was also a fourth year class where I'm a third year, so I was taking things a bit out of order. So I didn't necessarily know most people in the class. So I basically put my hand up, and I was very nervous. This is my first time kind of just coming out as a I don't know evil bigot or something, and I'm just like, well. I'd like to kind of offer like a different perspective. And I began to plant the seeds of sort of challenging the idea. And the teacher was kind of taken aback, I guess, and was like, oh, okay, thanks for sharing a different perspective. And she basically said, I'm not going to challenge you right now. I'm going to wait for our guest speaker who's coming on in a few weeks to explain this issue. So I would have loved for the actual teacher to challenge me right then and there, because that would have been great. I feel like I could have easily, I don't know, walked circles around her arguing this. But at that point, I was still like pretty new to the whole debate and like less coherent than I am now, and very nervous because it was quite, I don't know, intimidating for me. Like one, as kind of a shy person in a completely silent classroom of people who are 1 year older than me. Yeah, it was like quite intimidating to speak up, and like my heart was racing and like sweaty palms. But yeah, as the semester went on, I got like more and more used to just challenging this whenever it came up in class. And eventually we did have that class where the guest speaker came on, and this is kind of where I fully came out. So we had a guest lecturer, I guess you would say, come in to teach us about the gender sports issue. And this character was an activist from some sort of activist organization. I looked up their organization. It was, fully quite ridiculous. And this presenter themselves was a non-binary person. It was a woman who was clearly taking testosterone from her voice, which is yeah. So clearly fully bought into the ideology. And anyway, this lecture was it blew me away. It was even worse than I thought. They had the whole gender unicorn thing, sex is a spectrum. And when this was going on, I was basically just like taking notes on my laptop, like writing down every single false claim that this like activist lecturer made. And at the end of this presentation, like, I don't know, there's some students in the class like clapped, and it was really awkward and weird. And this person's like, okay, any questions? And my teacher's like, okay, anyone come and ask any questions. So I come up to the front of the room and I'm like, well, I have a few. So
you're like, where do I start?
yeah, I had basically been writing like out my questions on the laptop. And at this time I was still not as good at speaking on this. So I think I kind of wrote something a bit too complicated, so they didn't really understand my question. And I was coming at it to the perspective of women's rights. So I kind of introduced my question. I was kind of playing their game a little bit and sort of using their language. And I guess I was being a bit too cheeky because I came up and told them like, oh, I identify as agender because I don't believe in gender, blah, blah, blah. And then I told them that I want to ask them a question from like a feminist perspective. So they immediately got all these flags because I just was kind of, being a bit cheeky, and they thought I was on their side. So when I asked them a question from a feminist lens, I asked like, why aren't women like asked their own consent, and why is their sports category being used as a tool for males to validate themselves? And I guess that went totally over this person's head, and they thought, oh, blah blah blah, patriarchy, colonialism. And I'm like, hold on, no. So they went on a little monologue thinking I was agreeing with them. And then no, I just set the record straight, and I said no. My position is that you are advocating for the oppression of women via the so-called patriarchy that you talk about. And everyone in the room at that point was totally taken aback, totally crickets from all my classmates. My teacher was just like totally shocked. This activist person was kind of speechless. And I had a little back and forth with this person, and they completely did not understand the argument. So I'm not sure if this activist person was genuinely never exposed to any opposing arguments or just didn't want to engage with me. So that happened, and I sat back down, and like there was some other girl in my class that wanted to argue with me about that, but I kind of explained my point again, and she was just sort of like, oh, okay, thank you. So, and then there was no one else that wanted to ask any questions after that. I guess I kind of killed the mood of challenging this lecturer that came in. So that happened. That was kind of our conclusion to the topic. So basically after that activist came in, the class ended. Everyone left. There was no like discussion afterwards. And then next class, we moved on to another topic. So we basically got indoctrinated. There was time for one question, which happened to be me. The teacher didn't address my question afterwards, anything. We had no class discussion. So our education was getting indoctrinated by an activist that wanted to erase women's sports and, pledge allegiance to all the crazy gender stuff. And yeah, we were never given a chance to really rebuttal. And yeah, my thing is I would have been a lot less, I guess, bothered by this if we had another lecture where there was someone to come in and challenge these ideas, like another authority figure. But that, of course, wasn't what happened. We just got, forced these ideas upon us. And I should mention the other education that we received on this topic was from another professor who teaches other classes, who came in and talked briefly with us about the gender stuff. And our professor's like, oh, so-and-so is going to come and talk to us for a little bit about this. And then he was like, oh, should I address the gender topic? And our professor's like, oh, okay, if they want to hear it, go ahead and say whatever you want. So this character, who's a professor, he coaches like very high level baseball in Canada, like at a pro level, like women's baseball. And he talked about his experience of as like their head coach and manager, I guess, allowing a man to participate on the women's team in baseball. And he seemed a very shallow understanding of the issue. He seemed quite simplistic in his thinking. So he was kind of coming at it like, oh, I don't really understand this. Like, I should learn about it. And I was a bit hesitant at first, but when I started learning about it and I interviewed this person to come on our team, she explained to me that, the passport was changed from M to F. So this person had their passport legally changed from M to F. And this professor, who's the coach of this elite baseball team, seemed to literally think that changing the M to F on a passport somehow made this person actually a woman. It seemed to change the biological reality by changing the letter M to a letter F. And he went on to seem quite perplexed that this person threw a baseball faster than anyone else on the team. And I'm like,
I wonder why.
I
wonder why.
You can't explain that.
Yeah.
And the most troubling thing I found was actually he did state this completely outright. He said that he asked the women on the team if they would be okay with this to happen. And his response to that, he said, after asking the women on the team if it was okay to happen, he said about half of them said hell no, and half of them said sure. So he said outright that half the women on the team said hell no to a man coming in their change room and coming on their team, and yet he did it anyway.
Yeah.
So like I pointed this out when I wrote my letter to them, and I just pointed out that you have a faculty instructor who gave a very superficial lecture on this topic that admitted that he blatantly disrespected the consent of the players that he's an authority of and the coach of, which I thought that was quite like outrageous, really, for lack of a better like term.
And I bet if it was anonymous, it would have probably been even more than half.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if it was like even just a simple anonymous vote, like yes or no, for those who were maybe more afraid to say it, it probably would have been more than half, maybe even all of them.
But even if it's just like one person, I mean, the fact that they're willing to make one person feel that uncomfortable, and just to include
a man,
just to include a man on a woman's team, to me is just it's just nuts. It's just nuts.
Yeah, and it's also like point out like maybe, I don't know, maybe the half that said yes, maybe they just want to cheat. Who knows? Like maybe they've just been manipulated into saying yes because I think it's the socially acceptable thing. That's probably what's likely. But it's not just about your team anymore. It's about the other team. So you're playing baseball, there's another team, and you now have a man that can throw a baseball faster than any woman apparently playing on your team. So yeah, I like that lecture did bother me particularly because this wasn't an outside activist coming into our school. This was a professor that I have to take classes with again. And this is a guy that like now I really don't have any respect for you if that's like where you stand and like how simplistically you can think on this issue. And he also immediately left the class after there's no questions. He said, if you have any questions, please email me. I did, never responded.
Yeah, of course.
So it's just, I feel like all these ideas, they just never stand up to any scrutiny or any questioning, and they like to hide from it or dodge any questions.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a common theme, which we see pretty much every single day. I mean, this, so in terms of your class then, is there anyone else in your class or your friend group who kind of stands up to this like you do, or are you the only person really who does this?
No, I've never met another person in real life that is also gender critical. I've met people that silently agree with me, but I've never met anyone that's also like very bought into, or not bought it, I guess that follows like gender ideology and like critiques it, I guess. There's people like I have friends that when I explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I agree with you. But I've never met anyone else that's like, I don't know, turfy for a lack of a better word. And definitely no one else that ever speaks up in these classes, which is why I kind of felt it was important for me to say something. Because if it wasn't going to be me, it was going to be no one. And that activist would have lectured our whole class and gotten away with it without having any challenge whatsoever. Yeah. And also kind of why I wanted to come on, because like whenever I'm looking at I don't know, gender critical people online, it's usually they're a bit older, like millennials or Gen X or boomers. I've never seen another like Gen Z person out there. I'm sure they exist, but I've just never met or encountered anyone.
It's rare, and that's why we were surprised because
in a good way though.
in like the best way, because we're like, yes, there's actually someone with the head screwed on,
For sure.
which is good to see. And there are some people which we've seen online. I mean, we watched this guy called James Klug. I'm not sure if you've seen him before.
I don't think he's
on
Gen Z,
YouTube, but he goes around all of these college campuses and stuff. He goes around with Billboard Chris, and he asks all these students, should children consent to puberty blockers and all this, and he goes around all these universities, and the vast majority, of course, are fully on board. They say, yeah, of course, kids can do what they want. But there are some, like a small handful of people who appear where they actually do have their heads screwed on and realize the dangers. So it is good to see. But, what you've just described there, where you're bringing in these activists and they're very much forcing, in terms of the icebreaker thing you mentioned, that's one of the first things you have to talk about is your pronouns. That kind of tells you all you need to know for me, what's being taught in like a university now.
Well, yeah, I mean, an icebreaker, especially in university or college, like used to just be like, tell us your name and maybe what interested you
And-
into this course
and
or
something
this
interesting about
class,
yourself. Yeah.
things like that. Or like maybe an interesting hobby
That's what
to
it
get
was.
to know your
Yeah,
peers.
I
And then
mean-
someone was like, what's your pronoun?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at university, it was pretty much that.
It
like,
was.
you stand
That's
up,
what an
in-
icebreaker is.
stand up, introduce yourself, and tell like an interesting story about yourself. What's happened in your life, and that's pretty much it. There's no gender. There's none of this shit. So
Yeah.
it is crazy how things have changed. What do your parents think about this?
That's what I was gonna
that's
ask.
like an interesting thing for me.
You took my question.
Because if you were our son, which
Mhm.
which of course you're not,
Oh God,
but
we're not that old.
yeah, but if like we had a because we've got two young girls here, and
Mhm.
if they grew up to be very vocal about something they believe in and stood up in a class and voiced their concerns about something, and they're like a minority opinion, I would be very proud of that. So how do your parents feel about that?
Well, I think my mom is quite supportive. I talked to her
Yeah.
about like my ideas, and I think she tends to agree with me.
Mm.
So my mom's supportive of it. My parents are separated, so I don't really talk to my dad all that much, and I've never exposed these ideas to him.
Mm.
I have a feeling he might not be as in agreement or supportive because he's typically more like a left-leaning person,
Right.
which I guess I am probably a left-leaning person, but
Like an OG one though.
yeah, like I don't take my political issues like as a package deal. Like I think about things on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not sure, but I mean, at some point I'll talk to my dad about it and we'll see what happens. But yeah, my mom's supportive at least.
That's good.
That's good.
It's good to hear.
I'm sure like she doesn't want men in the washroom either.
No.
Not a lot of women do. And then like when like these trans rights activists say like, well, that's just your opinion. That's not all women. It's like, actually, I guarantee most women, if not, well, not all women because there's some crazies out there, but most women would not want what's going on. They wouldn't want men in their private spaces. They wouldn't want men in their sports. They wouldn't want, men in their prisons. Like there's a lot of things where women, fought really hard to just keep those spaces and, deserve their own spaces. Like it's not really that much to ask for. Like there's men's spaces and there's women's spaces. Like that's really basic to me. And like, that's just almost like a basic human right that women should have. Like that shouldn't even be up for debate. So the fact that it is, it's just like, that's even just insane to me.
It is.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that in the letter you wrote, which we've read, a few times. I mean, and you also mentioned about sport, of course. That's what you're kind of involved in. And you mentioned to us that you used to be a lifeguard, or that you're currently a lifeguard. Is that right?
Yeah, so I work at and I've worked at several rec centers as a lifeguard instructor, coach, and I've been like the head lifeguard at several rec centers. So yeah, that's been a big part of my life. So yeah, I do understand the whole issue, I guess, from a sporting perspective, and as someone working at a rec center, like I've had instances where a man goes in the women's change room and it's always been by accident. I don't think there's ever been like a malicious case. It's just someone walked down the wrong hallway. And I've always, whenever that happens, I just like signal over to a female lifeguard and I say, hey, like man accidentally went in there. Can you just like go get him? And, there's never been an issue. But it makes me think that if any one of those men in there say, oh, no, I'm she, her, we can't do anything about it legally. We cannot do anything about it legally. That like any man now has the right at any of the rec centers I work at to just walk into the women's change room and we cannot do anything about it. There's nothing we can do about it. And if we were to do something about it, well, we would probably lose our jobs and be sued or something. And this all goes back to Bill C-16. Because Bill C-16, you're not allowed to discriminate against anyone because of their gender identity. And what does this mean in practice? It sounds great not to discriminate against people. It's all wrapped up in this like be nice, kind, inclusive language. But really, what does the word discriminate mean? The word discriminate means to distinguish one thing from the other thing. Okay. So when we're not discriminating against someone based on their gender identity, we're actually allowing them to replace their biological sex with their gender identity. So the sort of gender activists love to separate, well, sex and gender, they're totally different things. But okay, so then why is this gender identity concept used to replace sex in literally all policy, all law, and all language?
Yeah.
So they're not treated as separate things, they're treated as the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So because of Bill C-16, which was put in, I think it was put in 2016 by the Liberal government, every single rec center in the country, as far as I'm aware, and definitely all those that I work at, there are no sex-based change rooms. Any man can walk into the women's change room and use it and do whatever he wants, as long as he doesn't actually commit some other crime. Like, I mean, I think it is a crime in itself, but it's technically not anymore. So yeah, we can't do anything as someone working at a rec center if a man wants to go into the women's change room.
Yeah, and that would kind of be a different case for Nicholas Sapeda, of course, because he is a man, right? And he's got into these changing rooms and exposed his junk to kids effectively. Yeah. So he is breaking the law because that's an indecent exposure charge because he's doing that to someone who's under 18, I think it is.
Yeah.
So he's literally breaking the law, right? But but people aren't doing anything about it. Is that because of the policies that are in place, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's basically as simple as, because Nicholas Sapeda says, I'm she, her, in the law, he is treated as a woman, right? So he's allowed to use the woman space legally, and he's treated as any other woman.
Even though he's got a dick.
Yeah, so it's not about because in the law, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. So it doesn't have anything to do with him actually being a male. So it basically, like in a court right now, it would legally be treated as, like, I'm just speculating, as any other woman in the change room being, naked, right? It would be like, okay, this is a woman in the change room and naked, and her genitals were showing. That's what the court would say. And so there's basically nothing I can do. Or like anyone can do.
Genitals.
Yeah. It's
like,
and yeah, I took like a particular interest in like the whole Nicholas Sapeda thing, I guess, because I used to be a competitive swimmer. I still kind of am. And I coach swimming. I teach swimming. It's like a very big part of my life. And I grew up going to the exact same type of swim meets that Nicholas Sapeda is in. And there's a few things that are like quite, I don't know, unusual, I guess, about the whole thing. One, these swim meets are age group swim meets. So in order to compete in these swim meets, you need to be registered with a swim team that is servicing kids and teenagers. Okay. So basically, it is typically impossible for an adult to end up in these swim meets. The loophole that happened here was Nicholas Sapeda swims for a swim team that has a group for kids, teens, and master swimmers. So Nicholas Sapeda is registered with this swim team as a master swimmer, and because he has that registration category with this swim team, the swim team is able to register him for the meet, and he ends up in the meet that is, everyone else there is a kid or a teenager.
So what's the criteria for being a master swimmer? Because every time we've seen Sapeda, he's never won a race. So
we've actually seen him in person too. Like he's really bad.
Yeah. So what's like the criteria to be a master swimmer? How do you do that?
Yeah. So to be a master swimmer, basically master doesn't mean you're like a master. It just refers to adults competing in sport.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so masters is typically quite recreational. I mean, it can be anywhere from very elite to very recreational. So master swimmers just means you're an adult competing in a sport or participating in a sport, and there is no requirement for time or how good you are, or your commitment or anything. It's just so that adults can continue to do sports. And in swimming, there are meets that are designated for master swimmers. So they're 18 plus swim meets, and I've competed in a few of those myself. So in order to compete in the master swim meets, you have to be registered as a master swimmer. And in order to compete in the age group swim meets, you cannot be registered as a master swimmer. So Sapeda would have a registration as like some sort of competitive open category or something, so that he is allowed to register in these age group meets. And the way he's allowed into these age group meets is because technically the age group meets, they have categories where it's like 13 and under, 13 to 16, or whatever the categories are. And then the last category is 17 and over.
Right.
So Technically, it's allowed any ages, although in practice at these swim meets, it's never all ages. I've been to these swim meets. There's never once been an adult, or let alone a university student, in these swim meets because they are servicing swim clubs that go up until you're 18 years old. And once you graduate high school, you typically move on to like a university program or master swimming, or in swimming, you typically kind of drop out of swimming at that point if you're not going on to a varsity level team. So at these age group meets, it's always kids and teenagers. There's never been an adult. I've never seen this happen before. And it's not because he's like identifying as a child. Like, I know that kind of gets passed around a lot. I mean, maybe deep down he is, but he's not outwardly identifying as a child. It's that these meets technically do not have a rule against adults, and he's then put into the meet with his real age, and then he's seated in whichever heat based on his entry time. So because he's kind of slow and he's a pretty amateur swimmer, he's not good. Yeah. He doesn't end up with the fastest heats. The fastest heats would be the 16 or 17-year-old girls. He ends up with like the 13-year-old girls because they're a bit slower than the 16, 17-year-old girls.
And he still can't win.
Yeah, and he still loses.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, 13-year-old girls can be pretty fast at swimming at that level. So
well, yeah, and if you're somebody who's not really in it to compete, no. Whatnot with like Sapita.
Yeah, I mean, have you spoken to anyone, because you obviously have some connections in like the swimming world and things. Have you spoken to anyone in regards to Nicholas Sapita, to people who you work for or you've competed against or with? Have you spoken to them about Sapita at all, and what they feel about it?
No, I like, just because of like where I live, I guess, like this topic doesn't come up much, and it's just like it's walking on eggshells. So I don't really have anyone to talk about this. I mean, I've mentioned it to like a few friends at school that usually agree with me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's crazy," I guess. But I mean, yeah, I don't really have any like other swim coach friends that are like super into kind of combating this, I guess. But like the one positive outcome of the whole Sapita thing is I think it is going to help wake people up to the issue, because it is just so blatantly obvious what's happening. Whether or not you believe Sapita does not have malicious intentions, which, I mean, it seems quite suspect given the whole context. Like maybe you think Sapita is totally innocent. It still goes to show that it opens the door for this to continue happening more and more and more.
Exactly.
And yeah, part of the argument that I like to put forth when I'm like kind of debate like sports and why sports should be sex-based is just the whole logical consistency of the argument. So people like, when I bring this forward, people will say, "Oh, it's not really a big issue. How many trans people are there really coming into women's sports?" They're like, "Oh, it's just like 1 out of 100 or something. That doesn't matter." And to that, I would say it's about the principle. It's so if you have one person who is a male identifying as trans, you are by necessity excluding one woman. Okay. Because in a swimming pool, for example, it's a very clear example. In a swimming pool, there's 8 lanes. If you put a man in one lane and 7 women, you've excluded a woman. If that man wasn't there, there'd be a woman. Even if that woman comes in last place, that last place was belonging to a woman.
Yeah.
And it matters for qualifying for heats and finals. Like in finals, there's only 8 spots in that final. And if you come in 8th, then you bump out a woman. That's a woman which is what happened in the Leah Thomas case, and it was very clear.
Yeah.
So if you argue for one male person to be included, you logically would say that 2 is okay, right? If you think 1's okay, you think 2 is okay. And then if you think 2 is okay, you must think 3 is okay. And we can go so on and so on until where do you draw the line? So I think you can only be logically coherent if you support 1 in the whole event. You must support the entire women's category being male. Yeah. Right. You can't otherwise, where do you logically draw the line? And that's the outcome that we will end up in. I mean, there was a story, I think it was somewhere in Ontario with the volleyball team, and there was like
we were just gonna mention that.
Yeah, there was 5 male players who were starting, and we just watched David Menzies' report on it today. he did like an update because the I think it was the principal of the school or something, or the university. They kind of made a statement. But yeah, so he basically said that, you know, there were 5 male players starting the game, and there was like some footage that they played, and you know, the rest of the team were female, and they were on the bench. They weren't even starting the game. And it ties into what you've said there, that you've effectively got a whole male starting team against a female team. So that's where it's going. I mean,
except like some of those girls didn't even really look bothered.
Yeah, they didn't.
mean, I played volleyball throughout high school, and I would not be happy if my place was taken by a man, or if I was playing against one. Like, that is also dangerous. Like, I mean, if you've ever gotten a volleyball like spiked in the face, like, it's not fun.
There were some injuries, weren't there, from this as well? There were some
I'm not sure of that specific game, but probably
there were
like
some head injuries.
Some of these like guys like looked really stocky. Like, it was insane. And like, you know, I don't understand when I see any girl or woman just sitting back being okay with having their place taken by a boy or a man. It's like, I mean, fight back. If you guys all refuse to play, they would have to change things. But instead, like, you just see them being fine or saying trans rights are human rights. And it's like, yeah, but
what about
women's rights? And what about women's sports? And like, you know, having an opportunity for scholarships, for like medals, or to compete in higher competitions or the Olympics. Like, there's so many things that you could reach for, but if a man is going to come in and take all those things away from you, then you may as well just go find something else to do.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen in the UK. A few weeks ago now, we did a show on this. There's been a huge number of young girls now in school starting to drop out of competitive sports because of all, you know, of all these men effectively coming into the sport, and all these injuries. What people are getting.
Actually went to this incident of the volleyball thing happened at Centennial College. So Ashley graduated from there, and she got an award, and she wants to give them both back.
Good, do it.
I can't argue that. And this one, trans folks have mental issues. If I had COVID, I would be quarantined. Why can't trans people be quarantined until psychologically released? I mean, we do pander to this stuff a lot in society instead of just fighting back.
Well, it's just crazy because like you were saying before, Jorge, that you're getting all these activists into your classroom to give you speeches. Is there anyone who isn't on board with this giving speech as well?
Okay,
so a balanced view. Is there any? So it's just one side. Is there not a balanced view from your teachers or anything?
So yeah, I guess I'll talk about like the conclusion of after I sent my letter. So when the semester ended, I was really annoyed by this. Like, I was thinking about it every day, and it just really bothered me. So I wanted to do something. So I decided to write this letter to my faculty explaining what happened in the class and why it's wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I sent this to like all the faculty, like the deans and all these people. And I did get a response from one professor who is a professor who teaches our more like science courses, like our physiology, anatomy kind of courses. And he totally agreed with everything I said, which was, you know, he's a science guy. He's biology, he teaches us our biology classes, and he was totally on board.
Breath of fresh air.
Yeah. So he kind of advocated to the faculty for me that I should be listened to at least, and he kind of took my side. So that was nice to have like an ally in that. But like it was never his classes that were the problem. Obviously, it's like his colleagues that are teaching these other classes. So he alone can't really change anything. So what happened was the faculty received my letter, and I got some response like, thank you for your concerns. Maybe we could have a meeting. So there was a meeting scheduled for this happened in the end of December. It was scheduled for middle of January, and what happened prior to this meeting was I got a phone call from the school counselor. And this is like basically the head of like, I can't remember the word for it. It's basically like student conduct or something. So this is if like students are acting out of line in some sort of way, like they try to like resolve issues, I guess. And this counselor was basically introduced herself, and she's like, oh, well, the faculty forwarded me your letter, and they said this was a bit out of character for you. And I was a bit confused by this, because first of all, the faculty doesn't know who I am. I've never met the faculty. They have no idea who I am, right? So for her to introduce it like that way and say this was a bit out of character for you, and I was like, okay, that's a bit strange. First of all, I don't know who these people are, and I was like, okay, what can I help you with? And she basically just wanted to understand like how I was feeling and if I was all right, and like how my mental health was.
Yeah.
And I basically just explained that I'm passionate about this issue. I think it's important, and I think what's being taught in our classes is wrong. And I just tried to be very calm and coherent. And the conversation basically went to, and she was like, I understand that a meeting has been scheduled for you and the faculty. And she wanted to know if I had a history of violence or aggression,
Oh
basically.
my
Wow.
God.
I know. So at this point, I was just rolling my eyes. So basically, I had to be very calm and very coherent and clearly explain to this person that I'm not crazy, I'm not violent, I'm not aggressive, I just have some opinions. And I mean, I kind of took it well, but I was somewhat offended that
Yeah.
having wrong opinions gets me like I have to have a phone call with the school counselor to clear that I'm not crazy to be allowed to meet with the dean, right?
Oh my
It's
God.
totally insane.
That's
Like I feel like if I was on the other side and I was a trans activist, I don't think this would ever have happened, where they
course.
have a school
No.
course.
counselor call me and see if I'm aggressive or violent or crazy before like so I thought that was quite nuts.
Wow, that
Absolutely.
really is actually.
Yeah.
It's
That's
crazy.
shocking.
Just because you have a difference of opinion,
Yeah.
you know, that's all this is really. You know, we always talk about this now, how universities have completely changed, and
Yeah.
you know, back in my day, which wasn't long ago, but I was at university really, but when I was there, it was always encouraged that you have a different opinion, and if you have a difference of opinion, you voice your opinion and you debate it and you have a conversation and try to come together on something, you know. But now, you know, like you've just explained there, if you have a difference of opinion, which in my opinion is the correct opinion, which is grounded in reality and science, you're the one who might be a violent person. You're the one who needs a phone call from a counselor. Like, it's absolutely insane, you know?
Yeah, and they like to claim
It actually, like, I
it-
don't know what to say. It's just
it
like,
just blows the
are you
mind.
sure you identify as a man? I mean, you want some help with that? Like,
yeah.
let's make sure you're feeling okay, because you actually identify with your biological sex. Like, how weird is that? You're advocating for women's sports. That's
Yeah.
weird. It's like, well, somebody has to. It's like, if all of us kept quiet, then like females and like women would just be eroded from like history. Like, they're already trying to say that men can chest feed and it's just as good as women. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
first of all, that's complete like insanity. Like, one is made up of like a bunch of drugs and another one is produced naturally from the mother. So, I mean, I don't think it even takes a scientist to understand which one is better. I think there's a consensus there. But anyway, like, so they're just taking away like things that women do, like, you know, not every woman, but things that only women are capable of, you know, and it's really frustrating and infuriating, really, especially as a woman.
No, it's
like it's
to me, it's just
madness.
to me, it's just the modern battle of men versus women, and men trying to suppress female rights and stuff. It's just the modern version of doing it. You know, that's all it is.
Yeah, and it goes back to like this whole thing of they want to have this gender concept as a separate thing of sex, but at the same time,
actually,
they want to like co-opt all these sexual functions. Like they want to take this gender identity and try to actually like, I don't know, co-opt the sexual like not sexual, I mean like bodily functions of the opposite sex, right?
Yeah.
So they want men to now breastfeed because they identify as women. But if you're it's just logically incoherent, and it just falls apart when you start actually trying to pick apart these ideas, and it makes no sense, and it's quite sinister at the end of the day.
It is.
Very.
It's like feeding into a fetish and like a fantasy, because like it's not natural. Like, it's not the way that men were made. And it's something that like women do, and it's not at all sexual for a woman. It's how we bond with a newborn baby.
I mean, it wouldn't come into a man's head to think, oh yeah, I can't wait to breastfeed a kid. You know, I can't wait to get a baby and breastfeed it. You know, it just wouldn't come into our brains.
It's also very painful.
It just wouldn't come into our brains because it's not supposed to happen. We're just not wired that way to even think that that's something what a man does. So the only reason why it would be a thing for a man to do is if you've got some sort of a sexual kind of fetish to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it. But it has to be a fetish because it's not something that, you know, a male is supposed to be doing. It's not, you know, it's not in our biology or our physiology to do that. So it's very strange.
It's manipulating again with like multiple drugs that you know, again, you don't even know the long-term effects this will have on a baby. But we do know since the beginning of time that a mother's milk is the most beneficial, nutritional. And, you know, I understand that some women can't breastfeed and things like that, but that doesn't mean that they're less of a woman. That just means that there could be other, you know, genetic reasons or, you know, some women just have it, you know, find it difficult, but it's a woman's right and a woman's job. And it's something that our bodies naturally produce from pregnancy as well. Like it starts in pregnancy all the way up until you give birth. And so it's just insane that like this is even a topic of debate. Like I saw that and I was obviously very grossed out. And I mean, and I just think like, how is this making any sense? Like first they're coming after children, and you'll see in like protests and stuff, they actually say that, like these TRAs, like they'll say we're coming after your children. And now they're coming after babies. It's like how many babies are going to grow up with like I don't even know what's going to happen to them if they are drinking this milk. And also,
well, there's been no long-term
no,
study.
exactly. It's a mystery. Like they're just little lab rats, which it's like, how is that not heartbreaking to somebody with like an innocent newborn baby?
Because they don't care.
And of course,
the only thing they care about is what they want. You know, it's not about the baby.
It's the most selfish thing because it does not benefit the baby. It only benefits that man who wants to experience chest feeding and, you know, having like that experience like he's actually a woman when reality check, you're not. Like, I don't care what anybody says, like trans women are not women, they're men. And, you know, just stay away from kids and stay away from babies. Like, it's so creepy. Like, if you want to dress how you want and whatever as an adult, fine. I do think you still need mental health like support, at least to maybe understand why you feel that way, but stay away from children. Like anybody under 25.
To me, it should be that should be a thing what even like the TRA should be able to agree on. It should be, you know, fine if you want to, if you're a grown adult and you want to, you know, live the way you want to live, fine. But why are you trying to promote, you know, going after kids and people in and teaching this stuff to kids when they're like 5 and 6 years old? Like it, you know, no, like there's not one person who should be for that, in my opinion, because that's just not right. You know, it's just not right. And it's just so weird to see all of these TRAs and these people who think that, you know, gender affirming care, aka, you know, chopping someone's boobs off or chopping someone's penis off or whatever, and blocking someone's puberty is a great thing to do. You know, there's just no logical reasoning behind that, but that's a great idea to do. For me, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all.
No, and yeah, it is like really frustrating and shocking that more people don't put two and two together, that this is just not an effective way to live your life and not an effective way to restructure all of society. And I think going back to like your point about selfishness and like narcissism is pretty like important. It kind of all boils down to that, especially with the sports issue. Like the sports issue, I don't know about you, but like I would feel so guilty as a man going into the women's category, even if I lost, right? Like it's ridiculous. So I feel like the men who are identifying as women going into the women's category, whether they win or lose, there's just like a lack of guilt and shame and empathy for what you're doing, because I think deep down you must know that it's wrong, because everyone clearly knows there's a biological difference. It's just obvious, right?
It is,
And
especially
I
if
think,
you're somebody who towers over
yeah,
the women. It's like,
yeah,
come on, like,
yeah,
give me a break. You
Well,
don't know that
well,
this is wrong.
well, even Bruce Jenner, aka
right.
yeah, we posted a clip from Piers Morgan when they were on there, and even Caitlin said, there's no way that I would compete in a competition against women because I know for a fact I'd win. So
Yeah, like he
and that's
clearly stated that he's got like a biological advantage.
and that's coming from a perspective of him being Bruce Jenner in the past and being like an Olympic gold
medalist.
yeah. So he's seen it from both sides of it. So of course,
sure.
and so for him to come out and say, look, this is completely unfair, guys. Men should not be competing against women. To me, that should be like a big kind of slap in the face for all these TRAs.
Well, that's why a lot of TRAs actually make fun of Caitlyn Jenner. I've seen loads of it online.
Why? Do you know what I mean?
Because Caitlyn Jenner, aka Bruce Jenner, like
Yeah.
he does not follow the typical TRA narrative. If he did, he would not say any of this stuff publicly.
Yeah.
He also says, like, in that clip, like he says that he plays with like women and golf, and they always ask him to like participate in tournaments and stuff, and he always declines or finds a reason, like an excuse to not go, because he knows that he can outswing them by like 100 or 150 yards or something, he said.
Yeah.
Because he knows for a fact that he's got an advantage. But if you talk to another trans woman who's totally full on, they would claim that they have the right to be in there.
Yeah.
So really, Caitlyn Jenner like looks bad on the trans community, which is just mental. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, oh, you don't follow our narrative, so maybe we're just gonna like disassociate you.
Yeah.
Like that's basically it, like shun you.
Pretty much.
And also like Caitlyn Jenner, I think is like right winged or whatever. So I think like people also like call him out on that because he goes on like Fox News or something. I don't know. Like,
so what?
I know, but it's, again, with like the left and the right, there's always such a divide. So it's kind of like that plays such a big role as well, which is just stupid. I mean, there's certain things that people should come together on. Left and right are like two wings of the same bird. That's what I always say. But
spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've just went past the hour, George. Jorge, sorry. Just before we go, I did want to ask you about this because we've seen Danielle Smith's announcement, of course, which some people were happy about, some people weren't, some people were a bit on the fence about. And then the other day, I think it was a couple of days ago, we had Pierre Poilievre. Yeah. He basically said, he got asked a question. I think it was from David Menzies from I think it was him, but he basically said that men shouldn't be competing in female sports, men shouldn't be in female spaces. So do you think that if Pierre Poilievre wins the election next year, which it looks like he will based on the polls, but obviously the polls can be wrong, we know that, but in my opinion he probably will win. Do you think if Pierre comes in, do you think we will see more changes coming into the country in regards to this stuff?
Yeah, I'm optimistic that things will change. I think what it really boils down to is Bill C-16. And Pierre didn't really seem in that interview or that press release or whatever, he didn't really seem clear that he understood that issue, because he had a comment about, oh, maybe it's up to the municipalities or something. But really, it all boils down to the federal Bill C-16, which informs the municipalities what to do. So if he gets pressured, I don't know, by our side to get rid of Bill C-16, then I think things can follow. And what I do think will happen, I think we'll continue to see in more elite sports, at least, rules coming in to play to protect women's sports. But what I see as a problem that's going to last for longer is likely more recreational and casual sports and kids sports that aren't as strictly regulated still having this issue. Because it's one thing to ban men from competing in like our national team and our teams that are going to the Olympics, right? But it's what's going to happen at your little local soccer league or your little casual, I don't know, like track team or something, or your school's basketball team. These are not high level competitions. They don't have like a big overseeing regulatory board or something. And I think these places are likely going to take longer to have like a clear, I don't know, a clear way of protecting women's sports from having men identifying into them. So I think that'll take longer, which is unfortunate, but I'm optimistic that at least more elite sports will slowly, I don't know, fall into place because of, I don't know, Pierre and what's happening in Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's true, but if they don't regulate, like, let's say high school sports, like that is also where these young girls are going to progress into like college and university and get to those like elite levels or like national teams and stuff. So I think it'll still have that effect. And, you know, I've also read in the past where like they might say, well, as long as you've become trans like before puberty and stuff, which also is just pushing it onto children before puberty. So it's kind of like, well, great, but also now you're making children like forcing children to make these decisions when they're not ready. And even if they think they're ready, like they're not. Like they're children. So it is going to be interesting. I mean, I just wish that at a federal level, they would just ban it all. Like Trump has said that day one, if he takes office, he's just going to ban everything. And I just wish that like Pierre would just say the same kind of statement. And like,
we've said this behind the scenes so many times. If I had the opportunity to be the PM of this country, which I probably won't, but you know, if it happened one day, I'd just come in and say, look, it's all banned, guys, and I don't give a shit. And you can kick and scream all you want, all of you TRAs, you can kick and scream, but it's for the best. You know, and we're looking out for our kids. We're looking out for women and stuff. And there's no way that I'm going to allow it in this country. I mean, I don't know why Pierre can't just come out and say that. You know.
No.
Yeah, I expect he's not like super, I don't know, educated on the topic. I think he probably just has his like, I don't know, sense of like morality and kind of understands that it's wrong. But I feel like he's probably not been exposed to essays of gender criticals and really understands the issue on that deep level. Which
you should send him yours.
Yeah. You actually should.
I'm not even joking. It was that good.
It was.
You should send him it.
It was.
Yeah.
Really well written.
Thank you.
And very clear, and I think just to the point, and explained so many different aspects very precisely that I think actually you should. And I mean, we'll send it via our emails too, and we'll just like spam his like conservative party email because actually I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we should.
It was really well written, and you know,
I love to
be educated on it if he's not.
Well, one thing I'd like to talk about if we can is you were saying Artemis about the puberty, like allowing kids that have been puberty blocked to go into the category, right? Yeah. And this is something that FINA is the governing body of swimming, so I kind of follow it somewhat. So after the whole Leah Thomas debacle, what happened was FINA eventually made a ruling that males cannot compete in the women's category unless they had puberty blocked before the age of 12 or something like this. Yeah. So they kind of made some progress, but they left this loophole in for young boys to have their puberty blocked to go on to compete with the women. And like, I'll just like point out some problems of this like stance, just for I don't know, people that may be on the fence. First of all, by doing this, you are encouraging young men or young boys to go down this path to pursue sports, right? So you're going to encourage children to sterilize themselves and medically compromise themselves in order to get into the sports that they want to do, right? So you're encouraging that. And who's to say that countries that are more unethical, I mean, ours is pretty unethical if you would say, but countries like China or some other country is not going to have a program that's going to say, oh, well, we're going to take our young boys and we're going to convince them they're trans and we're going to transition them and then dominate sports. I mean, that sounds a bit conspiratorial, but that's one argument. Like, you should not leave a loophole open for the possibility of that happening. The other argument is that the biological differences are not just due to puberty. They occur in utero, in the development of the fetus. The bones are a different structure, so the hips are actually a different shape. So in men and women, there's something called the Q angle, which is basically how much your femurs like go angle inwards, right? And in swimming in particular, is actually makes you less streamlined when you go through the water. So when you dive into the pool or when you push off of the wall, a woman is slowing down more because the shape of her body is resisting the water a little greater.
Right.
So everything being equal, a man diving in the pool with the same speed and a woman diving in the pool with the same speed, the man's going to go a little farther because of the shape of his hips. Okay. And that's something that happens in utero. The other more important thing that happens in utero. So in utero, you get exposed to testosterone, and this changes the nervous system of the man compared to the woman, right? So there's nervous system changes. And this is something in sports science we call neuromuscular efficiency. So for example, let's say we have a man, and let's say in his legs, he has just a random number. He has 1,000 muscle cells in his leg. Okay. And a woman, she also, let's say she has 1,000 of the exact same muscle cells in the leg. They're both, they both have the same amount of muscle mass in their legs. However, what's going to happen is the man, in the time it takes him to jump off the blocks and dive in the pool, that man let's say when you're diving off the blocks, it happens in like, I don't know, a fraction of a second, right? It's a very quick, powerful movement. So in that fraction of a second, that man is able to recruit, let's say 85% of his muscle cells in his legs to do that motion. The woman, no matter how hard she trains, she's only going to be able to recruit, let's say 70% of those muscles in her legs. This is because there's differences in the nervous system between men and women that develops in the womb, in utero, right? Yeah. And this is just called neuromuscular efficiency. And this is why men can jump higher than women. So people are usually familiar with like the vertical jump test. Yeah. Which is basically you jump up and you smack something as high as you can possibly go. We did it in one of our classes. So you stand, you squat down, and you jump up and you try and hit this thing. It's called a vertex, as high as you can. And the difference between you just standing and reaching with your arm and then you standing and slapping is your vertical jump.
Right.
And so we did this in class, and I was pretty average at it. There were some guys that were really phenomenal. And I mean, I go to school for exercise science, so most people there are fairly athletic. And I was pretty low on the men, but I beat every single girl in the class by a mile. And I bet there's some of these girls in the class that could squat more weight than me because, I mean, they're pretty athletic and they lift weights and whatnot. And, I don't particularly have strong legs. But the difference is that in that fraction of a second that it takes to jump off the ground and slap high, just because I'm a man, my nervous system is able to recruit more of my muscle mass more quickly. And this is what we call power, right? Explosiveness. And I think that the statistics are something like the average vertical jump for young college-age men is 22 inches. That's average. For women, it's 14 inches.
Wow.
Okay. So
a big difference.
This is not something that's trainable. This is not something you can train for. You can get very marginal improvements in this by training. This is something that's more genetic and based on your nervous system anatomy. Yeah. And this is what happens in utero. So even if you puberty block a boy, he's still going to have greater neuromuscular efficiency. Even if you make his muscles weaker by giving him estrogen and compromising his development. So even if this is a weak boy, he is still going to have that nervous system advantage. And this is why you see, there's like a famous picture of Leah Thomas diving off the blocks, and it's kind of like taken when they're hitting the water. And you see all the women hitting the water in a line. Have you seen this photo? And Leah Thomas is like way over them. And that is simply because of neuromuscular efficiency. So even if you make Leah Thomas a lot weaker by giving him estrogen and compromising his physiology, you'll still never make him as weak as he would be if he was a woman, right? He's still able to recruit faster and jump off the blocks. So that's why in swimming, like when you see women jump off the blocks, I mean, they're very elite athletes, but they are not going nearly as far as men when they jump off the blocks. So that's just like one point that if you ever come across that argument, it's like easy to debunk.
We do all the time. Yeah. We do all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's something we see pretty much every single day, mate. It's all these people, and you've put it perfectly there. But, there's some things what you just fundamentally cannot change, no matter how many drugs you take, no matter how many surgeries you have. There's just fundamental differences between male and females at the end of the day, which you cannot change. And it will never change, and the quicker people realize that, the better for me, But thanks very much, Jorge. Appreciate your time today, and appreciate you coming forward and being brave to to speak to us.
Yeah,
we know it's difficult.
Yeah.
We were kind of for a while, completely against this in the background, and then we kind of thought, yeah, we need to speak up about this, and it was hard at first, but the more you do it, it does get easier. And now it's just part and parcel of our day now that we come on YouTube,
turfing away,
come on X, and then have a moan about all this stuff. But full credit to yourself for being brave and coming forward, especially in your university, which sounds like it's very much one-sided. So it's credit to yourself, and we need more students like yourself to speak up and be brave and stand up for what they believe in. So yeah, thanks so much again, and of course you're welcome on the show at any time if you want to come on, and if there's a story you want to talk about, or if,
just whatever.
You're more than welcome to come on at any point.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, I think it's just important for like more people to speak up, especially young people. So if I can encourage like someone else to say something, even if it is scary, it gets less scary over time, I promise. And I've kind of accepted being a social pariah at this point, and I mean, it is uncomfortable. It's not very fun being, I don't know, canceled at school or whatever, and getting weird looks in the hallways and people avoiding me. But at the end of the day, like, I know where I stand. I know that I'm not like a hateful person. I'm a logical person. I like the truth, and I see this as a problem that's harming people. So I just can't ignore it anymore. And I know that in 5, 10, 20 years, when I look back on what I was doing, I know I'm going to be happy with where I stood.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I'll be proud.
Yeah. That's what we always say to people. And that's what we try and tell ourselves that as well, because we do obviously consume a lot of information about this. And we always think, we're going to look back in a few years and know that we did something right by our girls here as well, because we want to stand up for their rights as well. That's why we're kind of doing this in the first place.
For sure.
But thanks so much, Jorge. We'll pop you backstage just while we do the outro, and then we'll have a brief chat with you before you go.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Yep.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah. So that was Jorge, a very nice young man. We really enjoyed that. Good chat.
It was a great conversation. It was very smart, well articulated. And like we said, it is a breath of fresh air. And I guess I work with a Gen Z, but we don't really talk. But like it is nice to speak to somebody young and all that.
Yeah.
Though we're not very old.
I know
we're in our early 30s, but still, it's still nice to actually hear.
We're not even old.
Of course, we're not old. We still have I don't even know, decades left. You just have to put up with me for years to come.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, but I think I'll be able to do it. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully we'll have Jorge back on the show again.
I would love to speak to him again.
He was really informative and also just really kind, hopefully really great to speak with.
Yeah, I mean, hope we'll sort out a time with him at some point. Get him back on.
For sure.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you go.
But yeah, thanks so much for today, guys. Really enjoyed that conversation with Jorge.
Very true, Tommy.
Thanks, guys. Great conversation. Great factual understanding of anatomy from Jorge. Very smart young man. Gives me faith in this nutty time. Yeah, it does give me faith, Tommy.
Really does.
It's good to see that there's actually young people with their heads screwed on, which is good to know.
Yeah, for sure. They're out there.
But thanks so much, guys. We will be back tomorrow. We've got April Hutchinson coming back on the show tomorrow. Yeah. She was supposed to be on yesterday, but we had to cancel because Artemis
clearly the flu
isn't well, and she's still got the flu, but she's soldiering on.
Yeah.
So we'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern with April Hutchinson. Then we do have another guest on Sunday.
Oh yeah, totally forgot
as well.
Yeah, we do have a guest on Sunday. That'll be an interesting show too.
Which we'll announce tomorrow.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting show for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. Hold on, let's come in. All right. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you do like.
You always press the wrong one.
I know, I always do. Sorry, guys.
Always press the wrong one.
I'm blaming the flu. Like, share, subscribe, follow us on X. If you want to support the show, you can be a YouTube, Patreon member. You can donate on Buy Me a Coffee. All the links are in the description, and of course, the bio of our homepage on X and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you turn on notifications to know when we're live. So have a good night, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow night, guys.